Friends, imagine waking up tomorrow to a world where your daily commute costs double what it does today, where filling up your gas tank drains your wallet, groceries become a luxury, and heating your home in winter turns into a financial nightmare. Now picture airlines grounding flights, factories shutting down, and stock markets crashing worldwide, all because a narrow waterway halfway around the globe is choked off. This isn't some dystopian movie plot. This is the very real, very immediate threat unfolding right now in the Strait of Hormuz amid the US-Iran conflict. Oil prices are skyrocketing, with Brent crude crossing $110 a barrel, and Iran's threats to target vessels are sending shockwaves through global markets. The fear of a total shutdown isn't just speculation, it's happening, and the recession fears are mounting by the hour. If you think this won't affect you, think again. Stay with me as we dive into the details of this crisis, because the economic fallout could hit your pocket sooner than you realize. Let's start with the oil price surge that's dominating headlines today. According to Reuters, Brent crude jumped 10% to about $80 a barrel in over-the-counter trading on Sunday, with analysts predicting it could spike to $100 or even $120 per barrel if the Strait of Hormuz closure lasts more than 3 weeks. By Monday, prices had climbed further, with Brent settling around $78 after briefly surpassing $82 as reported by CNBC. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude also saw a 7.5% increase, trading at $72.01 a barrel. The New York Times noted that international oil prices rose as much as 13% when trading opened on Sunday before easing slightly. This isn't a minor blip. It's a massive spike driven by the escalating war in Iran, which has disrupted one of the world's most critical energy choke points. The root of this chaos is Iran's explicit threats to the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow waterway that connects the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea. Reuters reports that at least 3 tankers were damaged off the Gulf Coast, with 1 seafarer killed, as Iranian retaliation exposed ships to collateral damage. Shipping sources and officials confirm that risks to commercial shipping have surged in the past 24 hours, with more than 200 vessels, including oil and liquefied gas tankers, dropping anchor around the Strait of Hormuz and surrounding waters. Al Jazeera highlights that Iran's threats to attack vessels will strain global supplies of oil and gas, with several ships already anchored due to growing risks. The BBC adds that oil and gas prices have surged as Iran continues to launch strikes, with Brent crude briefly hitting $82 a barrel after at least 3 ships were attacked near the strait over the weekend. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, has made the threats crystal clear. A senior IRGC advisor, Ibrahim Jabari, stated that the Strait of Hormuz is closed, warning that any ship attempting to pass through would be set ablaze, as reported by Anadolu Agency and the Times of Israel. This is the most explicit threat since Iran told ships on Saturday that the export route was closed. The IRGC claimed to have attacked the U.S.-allied Honduras-flagged Athanova commercial oil tanker in the strait with 2 drones, resulting in a fire on the vessel, according to Reuters and Critical Threats. The United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations, UKMTO, reported an unspecified actor launching 2 unmanned surface vessels and a projectile at a vessel 50 nautical miles north of Muscat, Oman, forcing the crew to evacuate. Iran also reportedly launched projectiles at the Stena Imperative tanker docked in Bahrain, causing a fire that was quickly extinguished. This vessel is used as a refueling tanker for U.S. naval ships. The IRGC's actions aren't just threats, they're being executed. The Artesh, Iranian regular military, claimed to have launched 15 cruise missiles at unspecified vessels in the northern Indian Ocean, though this remains unverified. Wikipedia's entry on the 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis notes that warnings and subsequent attacks on vessels caused a sharp decline in maritime transit, with tanker traffic dropping by approximately 70% and over 150 ships stranded. Iran's commander in the IRGC said the strait was closed and that any vessel attempting passage would be set ablaze. This has led to an effective halt in shipping traffic, prompting Asian governments and refiners to assess oil stockpiles. The economic impact is already severe and spreading like wildfire. NPR reports that global crude oil prices briefly surged past 9% late Monday, with stocks falling temporarily as the war continued its 3rd day. Brent crude was trading in the high 70s on Monday morning following the effective halt of tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. CNBC notes that oil supertanker rates in the Middle East climbed to their highest level on record as insurers dropped war risk protection in the region. Charterers in the VLCC segment stepped back from the market and avoided securing vessels due to multiple incidents leading to increased threat levels. Experts are sounding the alarm on a potential recession. JP Morgan estimates Brent crude could reach $100, $120 if the Strait closure lasts over 3 weeks. RBC analyst Halima Croft warned that a war with Iran could lead to oil prices jumping to more than $100 a barrel. Morgan Stanley strategists predict significant drops in the U.S. stock markets if oil prices jump above $100 per barrel. U.S. crude prices also saw a 5 to 7.5% jump, still below $100 but climbing fast. Gasoline prices are projected to rise significantly, with potential national averages climbing closer to $4.50, $6 per gallon. A source told CNN that retail gas could rise 5 to 10 cents per day for a while. Food prices are expected to rise further, with some estimates suggesting a 2.3% increase in grocery prices due to continued high volatile inflation and potential disruptions from increased tension. The Strait of Hormuz is the jugular vein of the global economy. Approximately 21 million barrels of oil pass through this 21-mile-wide channel every day, roughly 20% of global consumption. The IRGC has mined the approaches and positioned anti-ship cruise missiles along the coastline for decades. In previous years, the threat to close the strait was a bluff, a bargaining chip. But today, with the regime facing an existential crisis after Khamenei's death, the calculus has inverted. If the IRGC feels the American response threatens their hold on power, they will view the global economy as a hostage. It doesn't require a full naval blockade to close the strait. It only requires the sinking of 1 or 2 supertankers. Once a vessel is struck, the marine insurance market, centered in Lloyd's of London, will designate the Persian Gulf a war risk zone. Insurance premiums for tankers will skyrocket by thousands of %, or coverage will be withdrawn entirely. Without insurance, no captain will sail and no company will ship. The strait closes not because of a physical wall, but because of a financial wall. The moment that shipping stops, we cross the event horizon. The price of Brent crude does not just rise, it shocks. We are looking at a potential spike to $150, $200, or even $250 a barrel within 72 hours. This is not 2022 inflation. This is a hyperinflationary supply shock. Every commodity in your life, from the food on your table to the plastic in your phone, relies on diesel fuel for transport. When the price of energy triples, the cost of living creates a crisis of solvency for households across Europe, North America, and Asia. Central banks, already fighting inflation, will be powerless. Raising interest rates cannot unclog a mined shipping lane. The global economy enters a recession that is induced not by weak demand, but by broken physical logistics. Furthermore, this event permanently alters the nuclear incentives. Khamenei famously issued a fatwa against the development of nuclear weapons. With him dead and the hardline generals in charge, that religious prohibition is null and void. The IRGC has viewed the fate of Libya's Gaddafi and Ukraine, nations that gave up their nuclear leverage, as cautionary tales. They will now sprint toward weaponization. The centrifuges at Fordo and Natanz will spin to 90% enrichment levels immediately. This forces the United States and Israel into a now or never window to bomb the nuclear facilities, guaranteeing a protracted, high-intensity conflict. This brings us to the escalation dynamics and the feedback loops that are now activating. The initial action, the decapitation strike, forces the IRGC into the use it or lose it dilemma regarding their strategic arsenal. Let's look at the hardware currently in the air. We are seeing the deployment of the Sejil-2, a solid-fuel ballistic missile with a range of 2,000 kilometers and a terminal velocity nearing Mach 14. Unlike liquid-fueled rockets, which take hours to fuel and prep, making them vulnerable to airstrikes, solid-fuel missiles can be launched in minutes. This compresses the decision timeline for Israel and the United States. There is no time for diplomacy when the flight time from Kermanshah to Tel Aviv is under 12 minutes. This creates the first feedback loop: saturation versus interception. Israel's Iron Dome and Arrow 3 systems are the most advanced on Earth, but they are governed by mathematics. Every battery has a finite number of interceptors. If Iran fires 500 missiles and drones, and the defense systems have 400 interceptors, 100 warheads get through. The IRGC knows this math. They are swarming the radar picture with cheap Shahed 136 loitering munitions, essentially flying lawnmowers with explosives, to force the Israelis to waste million-dollar interceptors. Once the magazines are empty, the heavy ballistic missiles, the K-bar Shekan, designed with maneuverable re-entry vehicles, follow behind to strike critical infrastructure. As these warheads impact urban centers like Haifa or sensitive sites like the Dimona nuclear reactor, Israel is forced into the second feedback loop, escalation dominance. The doctrine of the IDF is that they cannot engage in a war of attrition. They lack the strategic depth. They must achieve a rapid, overwhelming victory to restore deterrence. If they absorb a strike of this magnitude without a disproportionate response, their enemies in Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen will smell blood. Therefore, Israel must respond not just by shooting down missiles, but by destroying the launch sites. But here is where the loop tightens. The launch sites are buried deep within mountains. To destroy them requires massive ordnance, likely involving American logistical support or direct participation. As soon as the USS Gerald R. Ford or the USS Abraham Lincoln engages in offensive operations, the conflict ceases to be regional. It becomes a direct war between the United States and the de facto military junta of Iran. So, where do we go from here? We are facing a period of extreme strategic uncertainty. There is no clean resolution, but there are three plausible scenarios that systems analysis suggests are forming. Scenario 1, the military dictatorship. The IRGC successfully suppresses all internal dissent, marginalizes the clerical class, and establishes a secular nationalist military junta. They leverage their nuclear breakout capability to force a freeze in hostilities, turning Iran into a giant North Korea, isolated, nuclear-armed, and perpetually hostile, but stable enough to prevent a ground invasion. Probability, moderate to high. Scenario 2, fragmentation and civil war. The death of the supreme leader triggers a revolt by the disillusioned youth, the Kurds, the Baluchis, and the Arabs in Khuzestan. The IRGC, distracted by the war with Israel, fractures. Some units side with the people, others defend the state. Iran descends into a Syria-style civil war, but with loose nuclear material and ballistic missiles scattered across the chaos. This is the nightmare scenario for global security, as it invites intervention from Russia, China, and Turkey, carving up the country into spheres of influence. Probability, moderate. Scenario 3, the great power conflict. Israel and the United States decide that the regime is too dangerous to survive. They launch a comprehensive air campaign to dismantle the Iranian state apparatus. In response, Iran activates its proxies, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and militias in Iraq, to set the entire region on fire. China, dependent on Iranian oil, and Russia, dependent on Iranian drones, intervene economically or militarily to prop up the regime, creating a proxy war that spans the entire Eurasian continent. Probability, low, but rising by the hour. The old rules are dead. The theological glue that held the Persian Gulf in a state of suspended animation has dissolved. We are no longer watching a diplomatic crisis. We are watching the realignment of the global order in real time. The missiles in the sky are merely the opening act of a much longer, much darker structural transformation. The question you must ask yourself is not who will win this war, but rather what happens to the world when the energy artery is severed. I will be monitoring the insurance markets, the movement of the U.S. carrier strike groups, and the internal communications of the IRGC command structure. The situation is fluid, and the implications are personal. Stay vigilant. This is just the beginning. So right now, I want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this ends with regime change in Iran? Or are we heading into a long, bloody war? I read every comment. Let me know. If you want updates as this unfolds, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. This is moving fast. I'll be back with the next update soon. Stay safe, stay alert. See you in the next one. Take care.